Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast. Thank you for downloading. I was about to say tuning in, but that's obviously very old-time radio, and that's not what we do here. Anyways, I'm your host, Ray Harkins, and we are talking about episode number 10 currently. We have hit double digits. We are so official. That means 10 weeks in a row I haven't fucked up and missed a week in posting, so I'm proud of myself. Pat me on the back. Anyways, our guest this week is Brett Rassmusen from Ignite. He is the bass player and founding / original member. He also currently plays in a band called Nations of Fire, and he's done a bunch of other stuff musically as well, which you will find out when you listen to the interview. But before we get into that, some housekeeping / business / observations. Subscribe on iTunes. You will get it every week. I know I've said this for a lot of episodes now, but some people don't do that. So I just dropped my pen. I apologize. Go to iTunes, subscribe. You will get a new episode every Tuesday morning. And that way, you're up to date with everything. Whether or not you listen to it once a week or whether you just decide to binge on it for, an entire week of listening to like 6 episodes. I don't care as long as you're getting it because I'm doing this for you just as much as I'm doing it for me. And then also, if you do feel like throwing some more love our direction, rate. When I say my direction, this is all self-gratifying in some way, shape, or form. But anyways, go to iTunes, rate it, give us what your honest opinion is. If you think the show sucks, give us 1 star. That's totally fine. Or 5 stars if you're like, this is good. Keep it going. And then you can also follow us on Twitter at 100 Words Podcast. And you can also like the show on Facebook. So just type in 100 words or less and you'll find it. I try to do some stuff on each of those networks, maybe once or twice a week. Observations or just future guests and stuff like that. So do all that stuff. We are also part of the Punk News Podcast Network. Punknews.org is an incredible website where you can visit it and find out all of the information about your favorite bands and what they're doing on new records or tours or whatever the case may be. So it's definitely one of the leading sites on the interwebs as far as that stuff is concerned. And they also have a great wealth of podcasts that they do. So check it out, and you can find more information out on the site and just typing it into iTunes as well. So I'm excited because I get to, later on this evening, I'm recording this kind of in advance from this episode when it's actually going to air. I'm excited because I'm going to a few of the Revelation Records 25th anniversary shows. Revelation Records is an insanely important label for me, and I know a lot of other people in regards to independent music. They released Gorilla Biscuits, Youth of Today, Sick of It All. You name it, they've probably touched it in some way, shape, or form. And just because the label is local, I've had a very close relationship with a lot of people there over the years. Friends of mine have worked there. And so it's very interesting to have that perspective of being touched by this label and then getting to know all the people that were, help that essentially for a person like Jordan, who is the president, CEO, originator of the label. It's really interesting, but it's cool because they're putting on these shows here in Southern California where a lot of bands who contributed to Revelation Records catalog are playing, reuniting, bands like Game Face, Sensefield, Kiss It Goodbye, Quicksand. The list can go on and on. The show sold out very quickly, and it's very exciting. But it got me thinking on the topic of reunions because I know a lot of people, especially people that are over the age of 30, such as myself, have a mixed feeling about reunions, and I just kind of wanted to share my own personal opinion on them just because I've seen a lot of them, and I've also participated in one myself with my old band Taken. But my personal opinion on reunions is I'm not against them by any means, because there are people who are just like, fuck that, I will not watch a band, there was a time and a place for that. And I get that because there are times where I've seen bands come back. Like, I'm trying to think of a specific example. Okay, I remember when in the early 2000s when Coalesce came, one of their many sort of comebacks. I wasn't interested in seeing them, and I didn't see them when they came through and toured with a really good friends band, Curl Up and Die. I just I had no desire because I had seen them once or twice back in the day, or when they were originally around, and it was such a mesmerizing show for me that I didn't really want to taint it if they had any less intensity. And obviously, as you get older, you tend to not, you tend to be more aware of yourself in regards to, hey, maybe I shouldn't throw myself in a crowd of people and stab myself with a guitar, whatever. Not to say that you have to do that in order to make a compelling show, but Coalesce was just crazy. So I didn't see them when they did that, but then I saw them, I want to say in 2009 at one of the very first Scion Rock festivals. It was in the basement of this venue called the Masquerade in Atlanta, Georgia. And they were actually really good. It was a good atmosphere because they were just, packed into this super, super small place. And they sounded good. But then a lot of other people saw them later on when they did like another free show in Los Angeles with the Cave-In, and they said that it wasn't very good. I didn't go out to it kind of for that specific reason, and I'm not picking on Coalesce because, they are still very active as far as recording new music and putting it out there, and all their new stuff I really, really enjoy. But so yeah, my rule of thumb with reunions, as long as a band retains some sense of intensity, of what they kind of did when they first were around, then I'm all for it. Obviously, we had two huge, high-profile reunions this past year with Refused and At the Drive-In, and I did get a chance to see Refused at a very small venue, the Glass House, and they were really good. It was one of those things where I never saw them, so I was excited to see them, but I think no matter what my expectations were, I was going to be let down because Refused had been built up so much, but they were really good nonetheless. Whereas at the drive-in, I just watched a live stream of them playing at Coachella, and it just kind of sounded flat. When I had seen them when they were, at their heyday, early, late 90s, early 2000s, and it was, they were bombastic and crazy, and they were just so on point with their music. So yeah, that's kind of a rule of thumb with reunions. I definitely don't poo-poo them when they do happen, because sometimes it's special and you do get to see something that you obviously never were able to see in the first place. But tread lightly. Don't drag your band's name through the mud if you really aren't prepared, because there's nothing worse than if a band comes back for whatever reason and they just kind of sound sloppy, whatever, they look old, and not even so much from a look perspective, but it just, maybe sounds dated because they haven't really progressed as musicians on their own. So there's just a lot of baggage that can be brought in with that. But regardless, I'm ecstatic to see a lot of these bands. So, reunions. If you have thoughts on them, share it on the social networks and such. All right, now it's time for... we need to come up with a name for your segment, Joey. I don't know what...
Joey's Hot Corner.
Joey's Hot Corner? That makes it sound like you're going to recommend porn or something like that.
Yeah. Hey, what up?
Well, no, Joey will not be recommending porn, but he will be recommending some...
This time.
Yes, this time. Maybe next time. But he will be recommending some good music. He's our music correspondent for 100 Words or Less. And, yeah. How are you doing, Joey?
Very good. How are you?
I am well. I'm excited to hear. It's been a moment since you've been on the show, so I'm excited to hear what new records you may have.
I have 3 again, so I'll make it quick.
That's okay. It doesn't need to be quick. Just good.
The first is a 7-inch by a band from Canada called Single Mothers.
Oh.
That recently came out on Secret Voice, which is Jeremy from Touche's imprint, Be Death Wish. And this record is fantastic.
Thoroughly impressed with it.
Yeah. This is pretty much how Jeremy described it. What I hear and how Jeremy described it kind of is if the dude from Hold Steady sang for a hardcore band or a punk band. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I definitely hear that in his delivery. But it's just dirty and aggressive and awesome. And I think this band has a lot of potential to do very cool things.
Yeah, they I could easily see them, playing to obviously the non-hardcore world where it's like they can fall into, sort of like they could easily sign to like Matador and be okay on that label.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if they did like Toured with the Bronx or Fucked Up or,
Yeah.
band like Trash Talk, like none of those seem too crazy.
Yeah, for sure.
But yes, that record is awesome.
Cool.
Everyone should go buy it. It's cheap. The next is the new LP or debut LP from Expire on Bridge 9 called Pendulum Swings. And I've always liked this band, but this record is just hands down the best that they've ever done. The recording, like everything about it, the songwriting is just, they've really stepped it up. Yeah, it's really good. I really enjoy, again, the singer's delivery it's really cool. I think it's just the way what he does is different than most hardcore bands out there these days.
Nice.
Have you listened to this record?
I listened to it once on RDO, and yeah, it was good. I mean, nothing like immediately jumped out at me, but it's the band is definitely solid in what they do. Like they've you feel like they kind of know where their place is, and they're really comfortable playing what they're doing or doing. Yeah, whatever. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like they're comfortable. Yeah. They've kind of found their voice, and now they can kind of just expand from there.
I saw that. I mean, they've always been awesome live, and I saw them a couple weeks ago on that Cold World tour, and yeah, they just probably my favorite band all night. Like they were just super tight, great reaction. Yeah, it was awesome.
Nice.
And the last record is from Regina Spektor. It's called "We Came from the Cheap Seats."
You're a big fan. Big fan.
I've been a fan of hers for years, and was very excited about this record. And at first, I didn't like it because it's just weirder than I think her last couple records. And she's always been kind of weird and quirky, but I did not give up. And persistence paid off because now I love this record.
Nice.
Yeah, and there's a song on it called All of the Rowboats, I believe. Something about rowboats. It's song 7, and could be my favorite Regina Spektor song out of all of hers. So
nice.
Yes. Oh. So if you like piano and female-fronted singer-songwriter stuff, she is the one.
I've never asked you about your own because do you like obviously the A-listers in that category, like Tori Amos and like PJ Harvey. Well, PJ Harvey's obviously more electronic, but like, do you like people like that too?
But that just maybe out of my own ignorance. Like I've never really listened to Tori Amos.
Sure.
I mean, the ones I really get behind are Kay Nash, her first record, and Regina Spektor. Those are probably my two go-tos.
Got it.
In that field.
Sure. I did want to ask you because I'm fairly certain that you are. Well, yeah, no, I'm guaranteeing that you're totally on board with this artist, this independent upcoming artist who I'm not the only person that has said this, but this is the song of the summer. Carly Rae Jepsen, right?
Yes.
That's that. There's a song called "Call Me Maybe," which if you haven't heard it by this time, like you're not really paying attention.
An idiot.
Right? You're
not paying attention.
Right, you're an idiot that is not paying attention. But
the song is incredible.
It honestly it reminds me of the same feeling that I got when Kelly Clark's Since You've Been Gone.
Yep.
Just great.
The craziest thing about it to me is that she's 26. Yeah. Like that's old, but that's fine.
Yeah.
And the other thing about it is, when isn't the LP coming out? Like I feel like this song's been out for ages,
Yeah.
And I see nothing in the future about more songs.
She has a other.
Well, I haven't listened to it because I'm imagining it's not as good.
Yeah, it's okay. But yeah, I have no idea. I think, well, because, Bieber discovered her.
The Biebs.
Of course, the Biebs. So
Never say never.
no, of course not. So yeah, maybe it's just one of those things where it's like, obviously they, just wanted to get something quick to market and capitalize on how amazing this song is. And then it's like, okay, well, this hit, so you're going to get a record in like a year and a half.
You're going to live off this for a while, and then...
Right.
Yeah.
Well, then,
have you seen the video?
Yeah, I have seen the video. It's a little creepy.
A little bit.
I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, I see, obviously it completely matches up with the song and everything like that, and it's funny at parts, but there's moments where I'm like, that's a little creepy.
Yeah, kind of stalkerish, but that's fine.
Yeah, it's okay. But
who hasn't stalked anyone before,
Yeah, of course. I mean, you haven't truly lived until you've done that.
I mean, I'm standing outside someone's window right now.
Well, good. Well, I'm glad that we are in full agreement, and anybody that has ears should be in agreement as well.
Exactly.
Well, thank you very much for your segment, and have a lovely rest of the day.
Why, thank you.
Hey, I just met you, and this is crazy, but here's my number, so call me maybe.
All right, as I mentioned previously, our guest this week is Brett Rassmusen, the bassist of Ignite. And I've known Brett for a while because I worked with him professionally when I helped sign his band Ignite to Abacus Recordings, a division of Century Media Records. And so he was the business guy of the band and still is. And so I worked with him a lot on helping set up records. But my own previous love for Ignite goes all the way back to 14, 15 years old, where I don't even remember where I discovered Ignite. But I tell Brett a story about what Ignite meant to me and the kind of fandom that I had for Ignite when I was younger. And so, yeah, that's where we'll start the conversation. And hope you enjoy. But I want to start things off with my own first personal experience with Ignite, because I just thought it's so indicative of like what we experienced like coming up in like early mid 90s and that type of stuff. Where because like I got into you guys. I can't even remember like how I got introduced to you guys, but I just remember where it was like I attached myself immediately because you were from the same area. Right. It was like you guys were playing shows. I just remember mail ordering a shirt from you guys. From your old, like it was, you send $14
to Conversion Records.
Totally. Yeah. And I think it was actually, it might have been, or I might have mail ordered it from Conversion Records. Yeah. And then I saw you guys at a P.O. box. And so I wrote a letter.
Gotcha.
And so I've literally never ever done that ever since. I just felt like I need to write.
Right.
And so I wrote, and Zoli wrote me back, and it was just like, it blew my mind because I was like, I wasn't expecting a response.
Right.
It's like, in my own 14, 15-year-old head, I was just like, oh, they're so busy.
Right.
And so when he wrote back, it was just like, thanks for the support. And it was amazing because included a flyer for an upcoming show. I think it was a show that you guys played at that very, very, very short-lived Westminster Manor.
Oh, the one show we did there.
Right, with Circle Storm at 11:34.
Yeah.
But I just remember getting the letter and like I said, being so stoked. And I look back on my experience with that and then kind of like compare it to what kids have now, where it's like, I wonder if they get that same sort of sense of wonder or feeling when it's like, is it the same thing as if a band tweets back at them?
Right.
Like,
yeah, probably. It's funny. We had the P.O. box. Obviously, we started the band before email.
Right, of course.
Before cell phones. Right. It's totally dating ourselves back in the olden days.
Yeah.
But seriously, like, I remember going to Revelation Records and waiting for the fax to come from our European booking agent to see a fax of the tour dates. Because that was like really the only way to verify what the dates were.
Right.
You're waiting so you get the thermal roll paper and then it's spitting out and it's printing all crappy and everything. And then you're like, oh, okay, and then you look at it and you're always disappointed because most of it's not booked.
Right.
And most of the dates say TBA on it. And you're like, oh, okay, well, there's 7 of the 53 dates are booked. But it's yeah, just a different time. But back then, we had the P.O. box, and the stuff actually, all the mail went to one of the band members' parents' house.
Okay.
Because it wasn't even a P.O. box; it was just a normal house address.
Oh, okay.
On there, and then so we would let the mail compile up for probably like 2 months, 3 months.
Right.
And then our guitar player at the time, Joe, would come over with this cardboard box full of all these letters, and we would dump it out on my kitchen table, and we would dig it up into 4, and we would sit there and we would write every one of them back.
That's incredible.
And it's funny how so many people that I've met. It's funny that Zoli wrote you back. I met like guys from bands. This kid in Australia was ended up playing guitar in this band Vast, and now he's in what's the Joy Division kind of sounding band on K-Rock something. She wants no.
She wants revenge. Yeah.
So it's
really
So he's playing in that band now. So I met him a long time ago when he was in this other band Vast that was kind of big for a while.
Sure.
And,
I remember that band. Yeah.
And we got introduced, and then he was like, "Do you play in Ignite?" And I was kind of like, "Yeah." He's like, "You wrote me a letter to Australia when I was like 13." He's like, "I saved the letter, put it on my wall."
Right.
So there's all these connections we made with all these people actually writing letters, and we always thought it was important to to communicate, connect with the fans.
Sure.
Because we'd make these flyers where half of it was like band info on it, and the other side we just write a quick letter, thanks, blah blah.
Right. That's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
That's right. It was the backside was on that.
And so it was cool. It was, it was so much more time involved.
Oh, of course.
That. And then paying for the postage and.
I know that's true. I didn't even really reflect upon that part where it's just like, that's a good, you guys would play, a few local shows and be like, all right, well, $100 is going to go to postage.
Yeah, there's the stamps for the next batch of letters. Wow. But it was cool because I think it was just something kind of special that we did.
Totally.
Because a lot of, it's hard enough to, I remember, when MySpace was at its peak and people were sending you emails every day. I was literally at one point like 300 emails behind for people. And a lot of it was just like, when are you coming to Kentucky?
Right. I'm a big fan.
Yeah. But we always had this mentality of like, okay, let's try and write everybody back.
Right.
So when MySpace went away and then Facebook, you couldn't get emails. It was a big day to celebrate.
Right. You're like, that's one less input.
Oh my gosh, it was just like this daunting task of like this pile of emails or letters that we always just had to like get taken care of and clean the slate so we could feel like, we're not like, because it'd be a bummer I always thought it would be a bummer to, write a letter or your favorite band or whatever. And then 99 times out of 100, you're not going to get anything back. But that one time,
totally,
that somebody actually responds, and it's cool, man.
Yeah.
Connect with your favorite band or whatever, not even your favorite band, just a band you have an interest in.
Right, and it obviously it humanizes it, and like that obviously is such an important component of independent music.
Yeah.
Where it's like, even though I'm up here playing on a stage, it doesn't make me really any different from you.
Right.
Just the fact that I decided to pick up a bass.
Yeah.
Like.
Right. No, and like I figure I've never written a band.
Right.
So, and I figure most people never have.
Totally.
So the people that are writing are really only representing a small portion of. But they're kind of representing everybody else because most people don't write. So it's like that one guy that writes, like he's writing for every like 100 or 1,000.
Sure.
So it's like you kind of owe it to him.
Yeah. No, because they've done. Obviously, like you were saying, as technology progressed and it was easier to communicate with you, that makes it more daunting for you guys. But it's like when you did need to take that extra step of like pen to paper, here's some postage, like there was a few barriers in order to get to you guys. And obviously that, like you said, that is representative of that smaller portion. Yeah. But did you, were you personally always like, were you born and raised in Orange County or?
I grew up in Fullerton.
Really?
Yeah, I was born in Fullerton and then grew up in like the Placentia area and then been in Huntington Beach for like 20 years now. So
did your parents move down to like the Huntington area or like, were you always up?
No, that was like after, like in the middle of college and starting Ignite and stuff that I was up in Fullerton and then we just, every time we moved to Anaheim, that we just kept getting closer to the beach. And it was like, let's just get down there.
Right.
Like, why would we live 20 minutes away from the beach when for probably the same price, we can live at the beach? So,
Sure.
So we found a cheap place and it's been great living there ever since.
What was sort of your, what was like your gateway into, like independent music as it were? Like, was it introduced? Because usually people have that, older brother, sibling or whatever, that sort of gateway to push you over the edge. And
it was like the high school band that I started when I was 16, just
And you have to immediately reveal the name of that band.
It was called North by Northwest, taken from the Hitchcock movie.
That's good.
Yeah.
It's funny because a common theme that I've seen with a few other people I've had in the show, where it's like your first band is always going to have a terrible band name, or obviously you're like some formation of the music you're eventually going to play. There's going to be like 10% of that or whatever.
Right.
But that band name is by far the best one I've heard so far.
But I hated it because I thought it was. I didn't mind the name North by Northwest if we would have came up with it, but for some reason, and I was like brand new into music, and I just thought it was super cheesy that we were stealing something, and I didn't realize that's
right.
more the norm than not. Later, it's like everybody just steals band names from movies or books or whatever.
Sure.
So it was kind of funny. So I did that when I was 16 for a couple years, and
had you been playing? Like, when did you first? Like, where did you play in that band, and where did you get the kind of instrumentation?
That was the first time I bought a bass, like on day one of that band.
Oh,
and
nice.
We were all just self-taught. It was I come from a big sports family. My grandfather played college football, and he was a quarterback. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, and
so that was kind of what you cut your teeth on.
Yeah, I was just a jock.
Okay.
When I was growing up, because my dad, always watched sports. And there was some interest in music, but like my parents had like Beatles, Stones, Hendrix, like kind of classic rock records. So I grew up listening to like Beatles and Stones and stuff like that. But I was just all about basketball, football, baseball, tennis, golf, hockey, like everything.
Really, like everything you could get a hold of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's just what my life was. And,
sure.
And then so I met these kids in high school that were kind of like dark black clothes and kind of like gothy looking, and
sure.
They were just in my classes, so we were friends, and they said, let's start a band, and I was like, what are you guys talking about?
You see, it's funny because it's like, the atypical, like those archetypes of jock and goth kids, where it's like, those two, for all intent and purposes, like don't mix. But I mean, you've always, like ever since I've known you, you've always been the type of person that I would imagine being in high school, you what I like to call a dabbler, where it's like you would, even though you, like you said, label yourself a jock, you would be able to, people wouldn't feel threatened by you.
Right.
Where it's like you're not, you might have slammed a kid or two into a locker.
So it was like that. It's like that scene in Ferris Bueller's Day Off where they're just the assistant principal, the girls is describing him, that the jocks, the dweebs, they all think he's a righteous dude. I've always been able to get along with like whatever, the goth kids, the punk kids, the jocks, the whatever.
Right.
Just kind of,
and then, I mean, that's
feel comfortable in that.
Sure. And that's cool that they like that. Obviously, because you did that, you were like, they kind of, you learned from them.
Yeah.
Which like that, that typically doesn't happen within that, those, like I said, those two archetypes, like they don't feel like they can cross those those bridges.
Totally.
So they were like, let's start a band.
And I was like, okay, it might as well have been speaking a foreign language to me.
Sure.
But I was in because they were my friends, and then one guy bought a drum set, one guy bought a guitar, the other guy wanted to sing, so I just left bass.
Yeah.
I didn't even know I had 4 strings. I was like super like, my gosh, intimidated. And then we go down to the local super crappy music shop, and I look up on the wall, and I was like, oh, 2 less strings. Awesome. Easier. Yeah. No chords.
Sure.
Like, so that's how it started, and then we just played like high school parties and whatever.
Sure. Well, was it like
it was
pop punky or
straight Joy Division ripoff?
Really?
Oh yeah. We like 2 or 3 of our songs were Joy Division songs, and it was like our little group of friends. When you're in high school and you like just really fixate on like an artist or two.
100%.
And nothing else. Well, ours was Joy Division.
Right.
And that's all we listened to. And then we branched out and started listening back with the Bunnymen.
Sure.
And the Chameleons. But it was like, it started out for like 2 or 3 years where all me and my friends would listen to was Joy Division and New Order. And,
right.
And then, so we were basically kind of a Joy Division cover band, but it was mostly originals that just sounded like bad Joy Division songs.
That's interesting because it usually, like, I mean, that's why I threw out pop punk, because it's like, usually not to say that, Joy Division ripoff type stuff is difficult to play, but it's more, I'm trying to think of the word, more mature than, like a Blink-182 ripoff when you're in high school or whatever. Like that sort of, pop.
We just listened to the Joy Division stuff and figured that we could pick it apart and play it, even at the really like remedial level we were at music-wise. So it was kind of just, it made sense for us. And we were big fans of it, so that progressed. And then that band eventually like dissolved. You guys went off to college and did whatever. Sure. And then
so that was like towards the tail end of high school?
Yeah, that was like junior, senior year.
Got it.
And then I just had the bug to keep doing music. And so one of the guys from that band, we kind of just started jamming with other guys, and then we started this next band called The Jaded when I was like 19. And that was more like Social D meets the Cyphers.
Okay, I could see that, yeah.
And
I could see that name applying to that.
Yeah. So then playing with different guys, and our drummer was this guy named Ron Welty, who was in The Offspring at the time.
Oh, wow.
He had just joined The Offspring. It was after the Nemesis record. They were just getting on Epitaph.
Sure.
And he was our guitar player's buddy. They were from Orange, and I remember we wanted to start playing, and we were nothing. We played like 5 shows.
Right.
And but I thought we were a pretty decent band. And
Sure.
I remember kind of going, hey, we're gonna have to kind of have Ron figure out what band he wants to be in.
The priority, like that priority.
Kind of. It was like, we're getting serious with this, and I remember we had mentioned something to it, and he's like, yeah, we got a record coming out. I'm gonna stay with The Offspring. How'd that work out for him?
I mean, obviously he made the wrong decision.
Oh my gosh, so awesome. So every once in a while I'll see Ron. I mean, he quit, I think, The Offspring in 2000 or 2001.
Okay.
And I think he's set for life just from being on those 2 or 3 records.
Oh, totally.
I saw him in Vegas, I think last year, and he was just cruising around. He's got a place at the river, it's
Sure, just
comfortable,
hanging.
good living.
Yeah,
So,
for sure. That's hilarious. So, like, did you find the sort of music interest sort of usurping like the sports interest, or did you kind of still pursue both of those things? Like, did you ever have a chance to kind of like, play in college and that type of stuff?
I played definitely all through high school. I wanted to go play basketball at Fullerton College.
Okay.
And it was funny, I ended up, before getting to try out, I broke my ankle.
Oh.
And so at that point, the band stuff just kind of took over.
Right.
Yeah.
It's funny because you have a very similar story to like Riley from Thrice, the drummer. He had same sort of thing where it's like he was raised with sports, and but you do find like you have to make those decisions based on either just something random happening where it's like, okay, like, I have this interest as well. That's just like, well, I can still continue to do this because this is super fun. Yeah. It's not like you're like, all right, I'm going to turn my back on sports and like don't care about it anymore.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I was decent. I wasn't like all league or anything in high school, so I thought that maybe at the JC level I could make a team or something.
Right.
Maybe by year 2, maybe get some playing time or something like that, which would have been a lot of fun.
Right.
The passion I had for sports, but then you break your ankle, and then you just kind of it just kind of went away.
Sure.
I started focusing on music, and that started turning into a lot of fun and a lot of work, but a lot of like fun work.
Right.
Where I was really enjoying it. So.
Did you tour with any of those?
No.
Yeah, that was all just local.
That was just all local stuff.
Sure.
And then through some of the guys in that band, I met Joe Foster, who was who I started Ignite with.
Sure.
And it was funny. So I jammed with Joe a couple times. And then he was doing a lot of modeling at the time overseas and in Europe. He was like this pretty successul, like not supermodel, but like pretty big model during like the early 90s and late 80s.
Interesting. I had no idea.
Yeah. So he's like, I'm going to go to Japan. And then so then he called me when he got back a couple months later. And he's like, hey, I'm kind of jamming with this punk band.
Uh-huh.
But they needed a bass player. He's like, I showed up with a bass, and but I'm just going to try and convince them to let me play second guitar.
Okay.
Do you want to play bass? And I was like, I'm not doing anything really. Like,
sure.
It was kind of a lull for me between bands and stuff. And,
right.
So I went up and we started jamming with these guys, and they were in this punk band called Mad Parade, which
were
in the 80s were pretty decently big.
Sure.
And so we played with them probably about a month or two. And then I told Joe, I said, why don't we just do our own thing?
Yeah.
Because it was like...
It wasn't exactly what you wanted to do?
Yeah, and they had 2 or 3 records out, and
right.
It was kind of like a Sex Pistols punk. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with Mad Parade at all.
Yeah, I know, I am familiar.
So it wasn't exactly right up my alley.
Right, it's like, it was something fun, but like, obviously, because you were joining this band at that far in, like, you weren't able to put your own creative energies too much into it.
No, totally.
Because you're like, here you go, dude. Like, here's a bass. Thanks for playing.
Play these old songs.
Right.
And maybe we'll do a new record if things go well.
Right.
So we stopped playing with those guys after a month or so, and then we just started writing songs together.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't really too familiar with the whole world where Joe came from, like
sure.
the Unity, No for an Answer, like kind of like that straight edge hardcore world.
Right.
I was pretty familiar with Minor Threat at the time.
Sure.
And some of the bigger hardcore bands.
Right.
But yeah, I didn't know too much about like the Orange County scene at all.
That probably that was probably good in a way, and I'm sure that's why he was excited to play with you, because you had a completely different perspective.
Totally.
Because you found, a lot of those people, or I mean, still to this day, it's like, birds of a feather. Like,
Yeah.
and it's nice to be able to bring in another person with a totally different set of eyes.
Yeah, I was like really interested. Like Joe was playing, a lot of like 2, 3 chord, 4 chord songs and kind of fast like punk stuff, and I was trying to put like Joy Division bass lines over it and like kind of make it a little more melodic.
Sure.
And I think that's kind of how we kind of got the first Ignite sound, is like the kind of melodic high bass runs over just a one guitar trying to play a couple guitar parts.
Right.
And so we started writing this music, and I was really I didn't really want a screamer because I didn't come from that whole screaming world, so it made no sense to me to like, why would we get somebody to scream over this stuff and ruin this music?
Right, totally.
So I always wanted a singer, so we went through a couple singers at the beginning,
right? And
then once we heard Zoli's voice, I was like, this is the right voice for this music.
Yeah, this fits.
Yeah.
And did you, at the time when like this stuff was coming together, were you you went to college?
Yeah, I went to Fullerton College.
What were you studying at the time?
I wanted to go into law.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So that was kind of I wanted to eventually be a agent for baseball, basketball.
Sure. Kind of you want to be Jerry Maguire before that movie existed, right?
Exactly. That's because with the passion for sports, and then I really liked law. A lot of the pre-law classes and stuff I took, I was really interested in it, and, getting into contracts, but also more like how agents are kind of like managers / lawyers.
Yep.
Like that seemed really interesting to me. So
right. And it's kind of funny because I've something I was going to ask you a little bit later, but it's perfect to bring up now, where it's like, you as the bass player, like typically the business person of a band,
right,
is the vocalist, or usually it's a vocalist. Like that just kind of, I don't know why, but just by default, it just happens to be that way. And I always thought that was interesting about you guys, where it was like, but obviously now I see that you were already interested in that, so it's like, I'll just take care of this because this is something I'm already aware of.
I enjoy.
Yeah. Did you like kind of try to do the business stuff with the the other bands that you were doing? Like,
there wasn't really enough going on to even like have that get it even addressed.
Right, but maybe you were the person settling at the end of the night to get paid that $50 at the local show or whatever.
Yeah, I don't ever remember getting paid to be honest.
Then that was.
I remember paying to play one time, like when I was like 19, and going, "This is the worst thing ever.
Right,
I'll never do this again." I remember the guy at the club. We went in there like in November, and he goes, "I got a great night for you." He's like, "It's always packed Christmas night," and we were just hook, line, and sinker idiots, and we didn't know. We were like, "Oh, really?" He's like, "Yeah, Christmas night, December 25th." Dude, it's a good night to have a show. He's like, and here's what it costs. He's like, it's going to be a great night. There's going to be a lot of people. Of course, at the end of the day, it was just the people we brought. Right. And it was hilarious. So that was a lesson learned. Dude,
and you always have to take those hard lessons where you're just like, I know now what not to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Holy shit.
Never pay to play.
Right. So like you said, as you were kind of starting to, put this stuff together with Ignite, that was like early 90s, right?
Yeah, that was like 93.
Right. Yeah. And so like your first stuff that you guys started to get out, like was your first official releases like through like, Lost and Found, like that?
Yeah, it was. I mean, we recorded some really bad 4-track demos, just ourselves, that we were selling at like Vinyl Solution and like Zed's just on tape.
Sure.
And we sold a lot of those. We sold like between 500 and 1,000 tapes.
Wow.
Yeah.
And like, do you think that was all based on? I mean, because you guys had started to play out by that point, right?
A little bit, yeah.
And so, like, what do you think? Like, because did it kind of hit the ground running? Where it's just like once you started to put yourselves out there, you like the interest was already there based on like Joe's pedigree and like.
I think it was 100% the flyer we made that we went and took to Zed's. It was like black and white picture, and I still have the flyer. And so I just posted it on Facebook the other day.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, the original flyer, and it was. And Joe was in photography class, so he took a picture of me playing my bass, but made it all like blown out black and white, so it looked all photo paper copy, and it just said Ignite featuring X members of Unity, No France, or blah blah blah, and just gave, and then 4-song demo tape, $1. And I think just putting that up at punk shops, in Orange County, was
people like, why would I not buy this?
Yeah, it's dudes from No France or Unity, whatever, blah blah blah.
Right.
And so I think that was the big leg up right from the beginning.
Sure.
Is just the guys from bands, so it was like easy to get the interest of people.
Right. And did you like you said, you were familiar with hardcore just from like kind of a topical level.
Yeah.
Like when you started to kind of go to those shows and start to experience that world, like was it shocking for you, or like what did you what kind of what impressions did it make for you initially?
It was cool. It was definitely because I'd always been to like bigger shows, go see like PIL at like
Right.
you know Irvine Meadows or something. So there's a really like the band's really detached from the crowd.
Huge difference, right?
Yeah, and then so I think one of the first shows I went to a basement show out in San Bernardino somewhere with some like Christian thrash metal band a buddy wanted me to go see.
Right,
and that was a basement, and it was interesting because it was like, wow, it's like there's no stage, and
right.
But then I think the first like kind of like punk hardcore show I went to was at that club 8.5.
Okay, yeah.
In Fullerton, and I think it was the Offspring and Guttermouth and Voodoo.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and it was really cool.
Sure.
It was packed. There was like 500 kids there. It was sold out, and it was awesome.
Right.
And I was like, oh, this is a lot of fun.
Right.
It just seemed like the shows were a lot of fun.
Right, because it's like the scene that you were coming from, like it still had, you know, a lot of the sensibilities as far as like, you know, because clearly like, you know, Joy Division, like an independent band.
Oh, totally.
So it's like you saw the parallels, and it was like, it wasn't like you going to an Insane Clown Posse concert where it was just like, this isn't even a semblance of anything I understand.
Even like the old Joy Division videos, they're all like, it's kind of that same punk rock vibe show.
Totally.
Where it's like people are yelling stuff out, the crowd's right up by the stage and stuff.
Right, exactly. Like the Warsaw stuff.
So it was closer to that than anything I'd ever seen before. But it's funny, like I remember being at that show and being, wow, this is a lot of fun, and then talking with Joe and Casey, who were the drummer and the guitar player from Ignite, and them talking about how when they were like 15, 16 going to shows with Fenders and stuff, they were of course fun, but he said there was such an element of you were almost scared. As much fear going to a show as it was fun, because like the gangs and just the crowd that was there was like that punk rock 80s crowd was like kind of volatile.
Oh, 100%.
So I didn't really ever get to experience that in like the 80s.
Yeah, which is probably good, because I even though it's like when I first started to go to shows, like, you know, like in the mid 90s, it was like I was excited, but I never felt threatened. Yeah. Like you were expecting danger in a way. If you know, if I was going to go in the pit, like, you know, I was terrified.
Right.
And you should be, because you're putting yourself in that.
Totally.
But I think like back then, obviously, it's like if you were against a wall, you were just as much of a victim.
Yeah. But, you know, at the same time, those guys were 15 and 16, so they had a different perception. So it was probably a little bit more intimidating for them to be at a show with, oh my gosh, look at that guy, he's in his 20s.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, 100%, yeah.
So there's that. I think probably younger kids still go to shows. There's still that kind of intimidation factor that they have when it's like go to a hate breed show.
Oh, totally.
You know, and if you're like a 15, 16-year-old kid, that's got to be pretty intimidating to see a kid like that, you know?
100%, yeah. You're first or second time exposed, and it's just like, this is terrifying. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And so yeah, like as stuff started to kind of progress, you know, like because the funny thing that I think about Ignite as well, because I mean, I view the first full length as like, because obviously all the stuff that you did under Lost and Found was like, I mean, for all intent and purposes, it was a nightmare for you guys, business wise. And it's like, you know, anybody that isn't familiar with that label, like, you know, we could do a 5-hour podcast on why all the bands that they ripped off.
Right.
So I personally define like, you know, the real true formation of Ignite, as it were, where it's like, here we are, as, you know, Call My Brothers.
Exactly.
And you know, you guys have obviously paced yourself, as far as, you know, you're not going to release a record a year. It's like, I just find it so, I guess, admirable for you guys, the fact that it's like, when you do release something, this is very well thought out and executed. Like you guys, you don't feel that push. Like you feel the push of like, all right, we need to release a new record because it's been 7 years or whatever.
Exactly.
And you know just as much as yourself, but it doesn't, all the stuff that you have put out, like I mean, like you guys haven't put out like a bad song from a fan's perspective of just like, because it seems like you go over it with a fine tooth comb.
Well, yeah, and a lot of it's a collaborate. I mean, again, like 4 or 5 years between most releases, except at the beginning, you know, we did Connor Brothers 1 year, and the next year we did The Past Arlene's,
so that
which
was
like
pretty
bang,
quick,
bang, And but yeah, I mean, give yourself 4 or 5 years. If you can't come up with like 12 great songs, then you probably shouldn't put a record out. No, that's not fair to say, but
no, I understand what you're saying though.
But I mean, we do have time to write, and literally, if you're gonna wait 4 or 5 years, make your fans wait. If you put out something mediocre,
that's true.
That sucks for everybody,
right?
You know, these guys are like our fans. You know, all over the world, they're waiting for us to put something out. And at the time between Pastor Means and A Place Called Home, or Place Called Home, and Our Darkest Days, it was like, you know, everybody's waiting for something awesome.
Sure.
And if we just deliver, you know, something mediocre, it's going to be such a letdown for the band, for the fans, for the press, just for anybody who cares about the band.
Right.
So we were always really like adamant about like, these songs have to be quality.
Right.
You know,
we'll do this when we're ready.
Yeah.
And like not in like a, we are artistes, but like
Exactly.
we need to make sure this.
Once you miss the window of 2 years after your previous record's done, then the window for like a some kind of prompt schedule for releases, it's kind of gone.
Yeah, that's true.
At that point, you better just put something quality out.
Sure.
Rather than just like, oh, it's been 3 years. Let's just get something out. We have 4 good songs. All right, just like let's write 8 more and then just put it out.
Right.
Because that's I mean, a lot of people don't get past 4 or 5 songs on a record nowadays, anyway. So
very true.
Can get away with it, but I just think, it's just really important for me personally, to make sure everything on each record that we put out is quality.
Sure. No, I think that's obviously why the Ignite name can last as long as it does, because it's like, people have attention spans of like a gnat now.
Yeah.
And so it's like the fact that you can do that is because you've given them a very large piece of music that can last. It doesn't sound dated, like you can listen to Call My Brothers now and it does, like, if you listen to an O for an Answer record, it's a completely different story.
Right.
I mean, it will evoke memories of that time or whatever, but it's just like, musically speaking, like, of course, I mean, I can't say this to you because your records will sound dated the minute you leave the studio in your own mind.
In my own mind, yeah, exactly.
Because that's the type of person you are.
And all the songs seem really slow when you go back and listen to them, because when you play them live, you speed up the tempos like 20 BPMs, and then you listen back to old records and you're like, oh man, how did we ever track that song that slow?
Right. This is painfully slow.
Yeah, I know. That's kind of funny. But yeah. I think overall a lot of that has to do with, to me, is I think Zoe's voice kind of stands the test of time, because he's a great singer.
Right.
And I just think, great vocals and a great voice is something that kind of lasts.
Sure.
I think that helps us a lot.
Yeah.
We just wrote 15 songs and it was somebody screaming the whole time. I think the shelf life, or I don't know, the tolerance that people would have on it. I don't know. That's just my personal opinion.
No,
Some people love screaming, all day long, and it's just I'm just different about that.
Yeah, no, I totally get it, because I mean, you're coming from a different place, like, and that's your perspective. So, so when you guys started to, obviously release the first full length and release the EP on Rev and everything, you guys were doing a decent amount of touring,
right?
And I feel like, was it always intentional of you guys being like, all right, clearly we kind of have sort of not the hardcore scene on lock, but the hardcore scene is aware of what we are because of our affiliations with Rev and all that type of stuff. And you guys immediately started to be able to play with, punk bands, like, your Epitaph Records type stuff.
Totally.
And that, I presume that was a conscious decision where it was like, we would really like to be a part of that scene. Like, not saying disassociating yourselves from hardcore, but being able to play to, that wider audience.
I think it was important because, like you said, we did kind of have the hardcore thing on lockdown. We could go tour with Snapcase or Earth Crisis, and we did, and Integrity and all those bands. We toured with all those bands, and that was cool. But like, people don't understand how small the hardcore scene was back then.
Right.
Like, we did a tour. It was Ignite, Earth Crisis, Integrity, Damnation AD. We did it in like '95. We played all over America, and I would say the average draw was like 150 kids. And people just in their mind have like,
that lineup, you're just like, you mythologize
like, it's going to be 1,000 kids every night in every city. And it was like, we did, like, there was a sold out showcase show. New York was good. DC, a couple of the, traditionally big cities for hardcore were great, but it was like, that scene was so small, and we always wanted to branch out. We always wanted to be signed to Epitaph.
Right.
Because we always thought that would have given us the best chance to grow.
Oh, sure.
And it just never worked out that we were able to, get a record out on Epitaph. Zoli is now, though.
Right.
But I always thought that would have been the perfect home for us, because I agree. I knew that Instead had gone there. Right. And I thought that if we would have had that opportunity, especially in '94, when stuff was just blowing up, and like anything they were selling was just like moving units, Totally. And so that was kind of the reason why we would always jump on like a Voodoo Glow School show. Right. We would always try and jump on like any like kind of punk rock show locally, and just to play in front of new kids, because a lot of kids in the punk rock scene, from that, like the skate punk, the Pennywise, the Bad Religion, they didn't know who we were. Totally. You were a new band. Yeah, we weren't exposed to them. Right. And it's so funny. It's like sometimes when we play shows with bands like that, we're still like a new band. Yeah. And we're like, well into our careers. Right. You're like, we've been around for a few years. Yeah. And like, we'll go do a Bad Religion West Coast tour, and like all these like kids that are into the Bad Religion stuff, like a lot of them still have never heard, of Ignite. It's like, man, you guys are great. You guys have any CDs out? Yeah. It's like, we got a couple. We got a demo. Yeah, check it. We got a demo tape. So yeah, we were always trying to cross over into that, and even into like to the metal side when hardcore started getting like in the '90s when those bands Integrity and Earth
Sure.
Crisis, they were just metal bands in my eyes.
Totally.
But when they actually started getting like perceived as metal bands and like labels like Roadrunner started picking
Right.
up, like bands like Hatebreed started, like we wanted to jump on that as well because we thought that we could we always felt that we could tailor make a set list to like work with kind of any band. Like we could go we could go play with Hatebreed and we were just gonna play a bunch of fast stuff and like appeal to their fans, and then like we can go play with like more of a rock band and kind of slow it down, play some of our mid tempo stuff. And
Sure.
I just thought Ignite always has had this appeal across the board to where we could kind of play with anybody.
Yeah, you guys are very versatile. And that's obviously what you've done, where it's like you can it mimics your own high school,
Right.
where you're able to kind of like dabble into
Totally.
a lot of different things and be like and be accepted by a portion of that audience.
Yeah.
For what you guys were, without you weren't pulling any punches. You
Right.
weren't like, all right, we're going to dumb this set down. It was like these are your songs, like
Right.
they appear in your records,
No, for
like,
sure.
and it was
For
like
sure. You
that.
just gotta, it's just trying to be smart with whatever opportunity was in front of us to like let's like try and take advantage of this the best way we can.
Right.
And we're all that stuff. In America, it's always been a struggle for us to try and get a foothold and try and become like a bigger band.
Right.
But all that stuff I'm talking about just is exactly what worked for us in Europe.
Right.
Because it was just like I mean, we just don't play just the hardcore stuff over the shows.
Sure.
And stuff. It's like we're on big mainstream festivals and regular club shows, and we play with rock bands and punk bands and
Right.
everything over there. So that's where it's really been like
You
can see the whole plan like
Right.
come together.
You've seen the fruits of your labor be realized.
Exactly.
Like, yeah. And so when did you guys first start? Because I mean, yeah, for all intent and purposes, it's like you guys are very selective about what you do here in the States,
Yeah.
for, like you said, for obvious reasons and everything you were just describing.
Yeah.
But then when did you when was your first trip to Europe? And then when did you kind of first start to see those people, the sort of the groundswell of people really paying attention to what you guys were doing?
It was crazy because it happened so fast over there. Bringing up the Lost and Found thing,
Sure.
that label did like rip off a lot of bands,
Right,
no
right.
doubt in that at all.
Right.
But at that time, there was no label that had as much presence in Europe as Lost and Found.
Totally.
So while you were getting ripped off at the same time, every magazine, every store, everywhere you looked, your band's presence was felt.
That's true.
So it was kind of like, all right, we're not getting royalties, we're not getting paid,
Right.
but at the same time, we are like getting so much exposure
Sure.
in Europe, and like everywhere we go, like people have the CDs and it's available, and they were just pushing in every magazine, just ads, full page ads, and it was pretty impressive because our first tour that we ever did was a European tour. We didn't tour the States.
Oh,
first.
really? I had no idea.
Yeah, we played 5 shows in America,
Interesting.
and then we got offered the tour with Slapshot in '94.
Sure.
So we have about 5 or 6 shows under our belt, and then we get offered this tour. It was like, it's gonna be like 56 shows in 58 days.
That's
And
insane.
you're going to be on a tour bus with this band from Boston called Slapshot. And we're like, we are in.
Right.
We didn't have a singer at the time, but we're like, we're in.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah. So we got Zoe in the process of that time. But it was awesome, man. We got over there, and our first show was in Sweden at this big mainstream festival called the Hultsfred Festival.
Okay.
And we get there, and it's like, okay, you guys there's a main stage over there, and we're in kind of one of the tent stages. And
Sure.
there's like room to put like 5,000 or 6,000 people in front of us. And we'd never played in Europe before. And I was like, nobody's going to come watch us.
Right.
Midnight Oil's playing on the main stage. Blur's up next. I'm like,
Midnight Oil Blur. That's
yeah, it was crazy.
You're like, who are we? Who are we?
Yeah, and so on our stage, it was like, this band, The Refused, that I'd never heard of,
Sure.
Millencolin, all these Swedish bands.
Right.
So we played the first show, the tent was packed. They were playing in front of like 5,000 or 6,000 people. There was a ton of press there. And from that first show, it just grew.
That's insane.
It was insane. And 10 months later, we were on our own tour bus, headlining our own European tour with Undertow and Temperance as support.
That's amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's just mind
Playing
blowing.
festivals, playing clubs, sold out club shows. So like Europe from the get go has just been
Just hit.
unreal.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I
That's
mean-
why obviously it's like now you guys basically you go over there once, maybe twice a year,
Exactly.
like for the summer festivals, and then if there's something on the holidays or something
Yeah.
that you guys can go do.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's cool that you've been able to see that plan through
Totally.
where
And it just grew and grew and grew every year. And it was, it's been unbelievable. And then you just, play the big festivals, and there's a ton of press, and it just, it's just, until you put out a bad record, I think.
That's true. Yeah, they do. I mean, Europe, traditionally speaking, obviously has a much longer memory and reverential for bands that are considered influential in some way, shape, or form. Whereas in America, the reverential, people may listen to you still, but they won't purchase your record.
Right.
They won't go to your shows if you still do play out. And it's like that. It's just that. Oh yeah, that was something I liked when I was younger.
Exactly. That's a big difference between America and Europe for us. Is when I talk to people that know about Ignite in America, typically it's like, oh yeah, I used to listen to you guys. Yeah. And in Europe, it's like, oh, you guys are my favorite band.
Right.
That's the difference, like between just like kind of the stock standard Ignite fan. It's like the American fan used to listen to us.
So it's for whatever reason, it's like I've had conversations with a few people where it's just like you have these like tent poles in your adolescent moving into adult life where it's like you feel like you have to jump over them, and then all of a sudden parts of you have to be left behind.
Right.
Like whether it's like your tastes or the adult pressures of life or whatever, right. And it's just like in other civilized societies, like that seems to be less important, or maybe it's more important, but people are willing to kind of buck the system and be like, no, I still like this, but or whatever, I have a straight-laced job and I listen to all these hardcore bands or whatever.
Right.
It's so weird that's just obviously a cultural difference.
No, totally. But I think if we were in the press and on the radio here, it would be like, oh no, I listen to Ignite.
Yeah,
but we just aren't.
Right.
We never got radio exposure. We really haven't had that much press coverage. We haven't sold a ton of CDs in America. We do okay. But
sure, it's respectable. Like there's no one that can look at, because I think I actually just watched this documentary that like leaked on YouTube, or I don't know if the filmmaker put it up. It's called 1994.
Oh right,
yeah. So I watched it like last week, and it's really interesting to see that time frame encapsulated on video. And it was one of those things where, like, no joke, it occurred to me where I was just like, in my mind, like Ignite should play a role in that in some way, shape, or form. And it's like, it's just that interesting thing where, because Ignite is this band that is mentioned, is still mentioned this day for obvious reasons, and the fact that you guys are still active.
Right.
But then, out of certain annals of history, like they're just that you guys are omitted for whatever reason. Maybe just because you guys obviously like didn't quote unquote break up. It's like that.
Maybe, yeah.
In a way, because for whatever reason, people tend to pay attention to band, like oh, I was so into that band, and like if they did something now, like it would be unbelievable.
Right. Totally.
But yeah, it was just occurred to me after I watched it, I was just like, it seems like Ignite should play a part in that.
Yeah, maybe if we did break up and we were done, we would be talked about more. But like, we don't get mentioned in too many of those, historical pieces, which I think is kind of cool because it makes me feel like we're still like relevant and we're still current.
That's true.
And that was one of the biggest things that we've been really like grateful for, and is that we've been around since 93, so it's coming up on 20 years.
Right. And
by far, it's not even close. Our most popular, our most requested, our album is the last one we put out.
Yeah.
And
that's true.
And typically, not 100% of the time, but typically, bands in our genre, punk, hardcore, people want to not only, but a lot of times it's first record. Yeah,
greatest hits, dude.
Yeah. And it's nothing within the last like 10 years. Nobody's interested, and that's a bummer because it's like, I would hate to go to a show and have everybody only want to hear the 6 songs off of our first EP in my time. I'd be like, that's cool, but we just wrote all these new songs.
Right.
And for us, when we play stuff off Coleman Brothers, we play stuff off Pastor Means, a lot of times people look at us like, oh, are those new songs?
Yeah.
Which is really cool for us.
That is true, yeah. I never thought about it from that perspective. But yeah, that is, you can let that reflect on your legacy as opposed to, the sort of, like, you are an annotation within this history as opposed to like, no, like there's a relevancy still here for a reason. So when was the last time that like you personally held a job? Like, or has Ignite been your thing for?
I think we were in between Place Called Home and right before we recorded Our Darkest Days, like in 04, 05, we were all kind of working part part-time because we'd stopped touring to write the record.
That's true. Yeah, yeah.
And we were doing a couple side projects, so there wasn't a lot of like income being generated.
Of course.
During that, like probably like 2004, we didn't really tour that, or 2005, and
Sure.
So yeah, we were kind of all doing some part-time stuff. But then once we got in the studio and knew we were going to be gone for a while, you have to make it work.
See you later.
Yeah, totally. Exactly.
there's a reason that we make our overhead low.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so just looking at one specific experience with like your, the Ignite history,
Yep.
the would you kind of put the sort of, I guess, the potential for the peak of popularity for Ignite being kind of around that TBT record where you kind of felt like maybe the most heat going into it, or what if it's not that, like what sort of point in Ignite's career do you feel like where it's just like, oh man, like, this was the point where we could have ellipsed to what we are in Europe?
Right. I thought, yeah, definitely when we signed to TBT.
Okay.
And the opportunity to be on a bigger label like that. And, and Jordan at Rev was really cool because we were under contract with him for another record or two.
Oh,
and
okay.
we were like, all these bands were getting tons of money thrown at them. And we were kind of tied up on a contract. And
that's interesting, yeah.
Revelation was only going to be so big, ever. And so we sat down with Jordan and we go like, hey, it's 5 years into the band. We're either going to do this full on and go for it for the next 10 years or we're not. But, we want to have the opportunity to get on a bigger label. And,
right.
He didn't have to do anything. He could have said, oh, no, give me another record and then we'll see. And he was so cool. He was like, okay, that's cool. I'll help you guys make a demo and I'll help you shop it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so we were just like, wow, that's really cool for your label to like help you leave the label, So,
right.
So we sent it out. There was some interest from Roadrunner and a couple other labels, but TBT by far was like the most interested. They were, they loved the demo that we recorded and they loved Zoe's voice and the history of the band and everything. And they had Seven Dust at the time, and quite a few bands were selling quite a lot of records.
Definitely.
And, we went out to New York and the president of the company sat down with us and he said, man, I think that album you guys just wrote and recorded is going to be TBT's album of the year. And when the president of a company tells you that,
dude,
all you can do is believe it.
Of course.
I mean, because what else are you going to do?
Right, yeah. No, you're a liar.
Yeah, exactly. So we were really optimistic that they were going to like just push the record like crazy.
Sure.
And they had at that time said that, because we wanted to license the record over to Europe to a label that was already there.
Right.
But they said that, no, we're going to launch TBT Europe, and your guys' album is going to lead the charge, lead the way. It's going to like establish the label. We were a little like reticent.
Yeah.
We were like, is this really going to happen? But we're putting millions of dollars into it. We're going to like do whatever you guys want.
Sure.
So we had no real other choice than just to be on board.
Right.
And we're like, wow, this is going to be great. They're going to like really push this because they're going to want to establish TBT Europe.
Of course.
This is going to be awesome.
Right.
Videos and music and push to radio. And
sure,
blah, blah, blah.
sure.
Well, 3 months later, TBT Europe, I get folded. 3 months after the record came out, they weren't pushing the record anymore. So it was kind of like just standard, typical
major label stuff.
Kind of major label, throw it against the wall, see if it sticks. If it doesn't, move on to the next thing. So,
right.
So it was kind of a bummer, but we knew what we were getting into.
Well, of course, yeah. You were smart enough, you weren't just like starry-eyed 16-year-old kids who were just like, here we go.
Right.
Here's our one shot.
I mean, we could have went with, and in hindsight, we probably should have tried to get on a Victory or an Epitaph at that time because I think that would have been better served.
Sure.
But really having the meetings with TBT and seeing how incredibly interested and excited they were and what their plans were for the band. It was really hard to ignore that and go, no, we're just going to go with the kind of the mid-level punk rocker.
This, I guess, in a way, like could be considered like a safe bet.
Yeah.
Where you didn't know, like you knew they could potentially grow your career, but it would still like, there's a difference between growing your career on Epitaph over like a course of 3 or 4 years, and then like say you do hit in a TBT, your shit will change within a year.
Yeah, and we were like, let's take that risk, and it was on us,
Yeah.
And we knew that there was going to be totally some risks involved,
right?
And that potentially it could just be exactly what happened.
Sure.
But we took advantage of it. They spent a lot of money on the record. They marketed it, so we were going to do the DIY punk rock thing that we'd always been. You know, we didn't need the tour support. We didn't need like everything that they had promised. It would have been nice, but we had distribution.
Right.
We ended up licensing the record out to actually a major label in Europe.
Okay.
so we basically got to accomplish what we
Set
originally,
out for, right.
on like the small end of the scale.
Sure,
You know,
sure.
we were going to do that no matter what. We were going to tour. We were going to get the record out. We were going to push it, and we did it. In Europe, it grew like crazy.
Right.
Europe just really like gravitated towards that record.
Yeah, and it's. I think it's always to hear, because I mean, obviously, like we worked with each other professionally
Right.
at Abacus and stuff like that. And every time I've heard you reference just basically any of your business relationships, it's like you guys have always been like great, beyond gracious, and like not gracious in like a painting everything with like rosy colors, but
Right.
you're just like. It was just as much like for whatever bar was set that
Right.
wasn't achieved, like you as the band took I mean, maybe not as much responsibility as like the label or whatever, but you took responsibility. Where it's
Right.
like you hear so many bands go out there and are just like, "Oh, label didn't do it." Like the age-old label didn't do anything for
Right.
us. And it's like you guys have always been, I guess, realistic about everything. And
I think bands a lot of times fall under that scenario where anytime they get somebody else involved, whether it's a manager or an agent or a label, they stop working as hard because they
That's true.
assume that somebody else is going to do it.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
fall into that all the time where it's like we start working with somebody and I go, oh, well, he'll handle it. Not a lot of times they don't.
Sure.
Sometimes they do, but it pushing your own band and pushing your own music and pushing your own causes yourself,
Mhm.
it's never going to go as far, just relying on somebody else.
That's
it's
true.
always going to go a lot further with yourself pushing it, especially if you have somebody else on board, like a publicist or a marketing guy.
Right.
Like, be involved. Like, don't just like, oh, they'll do it. Go, no, I want my stuff in these magazines. Are you guys doing this? Because, whatever. There's a million different examples.
Right.
But I just think, I think a lot of bands, a lot of times when they get signed, they just think the label's going to do everything for them.
Right.
And I think that, they don't.
Right.
I think when you get signed and even when you get a manager, an agent, that's when it's actually time for you to work harder. Because, you get an agent, okay, get me some tours, Well, now is when you should go hit up all your, bands that you know.
Totally.
Get us on these tours. We have this agent now.
Yep.
He can get in contact with you. Don't just assume your agent's going to go get you shows. Don't just assume a manager's going to get you, your endorsements or your deals or whatever. It's like,
Sure.
It's just something else to bring to the table, I think.
Right. Here's your golden ticket.
Yeah. Don't
Like-
don't rely on people because and I fall into that a lot of times just because it just,
It feels right to do that
yeah.
initially.
It's
Sure.
like, okay, these guys are going to take care of this. And it's like, I have to always just like kick myself like, no, now it's time to get to work,
Right,
Make
right,
these
right.
guys earn their percentage.
Sure. Right. You like all of what you said right there should be like given out to every band as they sign a record, like a record deal,
Totally.
where it's just like here's kind of the golden rules. Like
Yeah.
here's how to maintain yourself to where you can still play music. As you grow older, like this is how you do it, just from like a business perspective.
Yeah.
Musically you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, totally. I think that the best thing somebody ever told me is when you get a manager or when you get a label, don't ride what vision they have. Make them, take your vision
Sure.
and turn it into something bigger.
Right, right.
Don't just hand the reins over to these people and go, okay, do something cool with my band or whatever,
Yeah, that's true.
I think the driving force should always be the bands, and these people should always be on a short leash for hire, and they should be able to be, fired at any time if they slack. And
Yeah, no, totally.
a lot of people just get lax.
Right. Yeah. No, it's 100% true. Yeah. And so now you're doing Nations of Fire.
Yes.
Like, and that's been going for like 2 or 3 years
Yeah.
now. You guys are about to release a new full length,
Yeah.
or you guys are preparing for
Yeah,
it
yeah.
currently. So tell me how. I mean, obviously because Zoli's doing Pennywise
Yeah.
now, and it's like you guys are all pursuing your own musical interests, but Ignite obviously will always still.
Right.
I mean, as you've said in many interviews,
Yeah.
where it's like, all right, people immediately see those bits of news where it's like, oh, members started other bands, and it's like, oh,
Right.
this band's dead. It's
Right.
like you guys have done a very proactive job where it's just like, calm down.
Yeah.
You're gonna get new material from us. We'll let
Someday.
you know. Yeah, we will let you know when you're not going to anymore.
Totally.
Um,
I don't think Ignite will ever break up.
yeah. It's so funny because especially this day and age,
Yeah.
it seems silly to me when bands like make that statement.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
It like unless you hate each other, unless you like,
Right.
you and Zoli are just like, we literally cannot be in a room. We need a therapist with us.
Oh, there's that too.
Right.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it's like if you are still have an amicable relationship and you enjoy creating things together, it's like why the hell do you need to put this like stamp on it? Be like, yeah, this was the RIP date.
I do think there is some genius sometimes in bands that do break up and get back together.
Of course,
because it's like, I don't know, they can really, I mean, like at the end of the day, like somebody that's been doing music for 10, 15 years, like you do it for the love of music, but you do it because it's your career.
Of course.
And you need to make money. So sometimes when I see bands break up, they get a reunion tour out of it.
Oh, 100%.
They get the comeback tour.
Totally.
And they get the farewell tour again.
Sure.
You know what I
They
mean?
get the obligatory pay increase. It's like they're even on the smallest levels. It's like, I mean, dude, like when my band Taken did stuff, it's like, we got, I mean, of course it's incremental. It's like, as opposed to getting paid $300 a Chain Reaction, we got like $2,000. It was like, holy shit. Like,
Right.
But even rightfully so, it's like obviously the other bands that you've seen, Refused and all that type of stuff, where it's just like, they at that Glass House show the Refused played, Dennis was like, our last show in the States was in front of like, 15 people.
Right.
It's like, it could, I mean, now that that's kind of, not saying that that's what Refuse is doing, it's like a marketing strategy.
Right. I think it's a different thing, but yeah.
Totally, but it's like, I mean, now that idea is in people's heads where it's just like, oh, it could be. And maybe that's obviously why they have to feel they put that stamp, but yeah, I'm glad that you guys agree that here we go, like we don't need to put this.
I just think it would make us not a relevant current band. We'd seem like an older band.
Right.
So there was no reason. And there's no reason. And the most important thing is we've never wanted to break up.
Right.
We've always wanted to put out new music.
Right.
So.
Which, that's great.
Yeah,
The fire is still
and
there.
Tour, and it's so fun touring and like seeing the world. And it's cool. We've been to 40 different countries, and like there's like 40 other ones that we want to go to still.
Right, and you have the ability to.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then kind of wrapping things up with Nations of Fire, like that. You guys definitely have a lot of pedigree with the band as well, and so is the focus on that where it's like kind of trying to, I mean, tour smartly and kind of like all right, is it obviously the mentality of like, hey, let's tour 300 days out of the year just isn't realistic.
Right.
I mean, is it realistic from the standpoint of like, here we are, let's play in front of 20 kids a night,
right.
like that's just.
Yeah, we're going to try and tour as much as we can with the band. The record's going to come out sometime this year.
Sure.
And it's, it's four guys that have known each other forever from all the different tours we've done together.
Sure.
It's fun. It's new and it's something different. And I think, Zoli doing Pennywise is something, definitely different and,
of course,
interesting for him and stuff. And same thing for me. And, the whole thing behind Nations of Fire was like to do a new band,
right, with
guys that I know and like,
of course.
And our kind of mentality was like, for me,
sure,
and Nick, and I think for all the guys that we didn't want to do the same band that we'd already been in before.
Right, you don't want to ignite 2.0.
Yeah,
right.
Which we could have written a bunch of hardcore songs, called it whatever, and then put it out. And I think it would have been successful, but
sure, it's
a little more challenging. I think than what we're doing. We're just not trying to like make a punk band. We want to make music that's really interesting for us. Right. Sometimes that works for bands. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's a flop. It's like but I believe in the stuff, and I think that once we get out there and get the record released and get people hearing it and get touring, that it's going to be successful. It's going to be fun. Sure.
And like you guys definitely aren't like you said, you could have taken the quote unquote easy path, the proverbial easy path, right. And it's like, do what people are expecting you to do, right? But then obviously it's like you're pushing yourself. You're well, for one, you're playing like you said with people like this isn't a manufactured band. Like at this point, right. you could play with other people who are just like, oh, I kind of know them, right? But they have this pedigree, right? And I kind of know them, right? They have this put a super band together, or whatever. Right. But it's like even though all these other people they have done notable things, totally. There's a direct connection to you. Yeah, I just think as long as we're having fun, we're enjoying the music, and we believe in it. That's kind of the most important thing. That's the only thing that I can fall back on. Right. Is every Ignite record we've ever done, and that's my experience with music is doing Ignite. Is if I like it and I believe in it, it's been successful so far. So it's for me, that's the formula that's worked. Right. So it's like that's all I know. Right. So if you're I can duplicate that. Yeah. If I believe in something and push it, and I like it, and I think maybe potentially other people will. Right,
You know,
right.
And until that doesn't work
Until-
out for me, I'm going to keep doing it.
Until I'm proven otherwise.
Yeah.
Like, well,
Yeah.
I'll keep going.
No, totally. I mean, I've done all kinds of different stuff. Like Zoli's done some acoustic side stuff.
Sure.
I-
You guys
I've
have
been-
done Zoli Band
Yeah,
together,
that's,
right?
that's what
yeah.
I mean. Yeah,
right.
and that's like completely different. And,
100%.
Yeah, and that's fun, and
Sure.
I like it because I'm just a fan. I'm a fan of music,
Right.
and but you only have so many hours in a day to do, music.
Yeah, to do something quality. It's
Yeah.
like you don't want to do as evidenced by your track records. Like you don't want to do something like half-assed. You want to
Right.
do something like, oh yeah, this is kind of just like an idea.
Yeah,
Here it is, world.
yeah,
Do what you want with it.
yeah. So I'm excited. It's going to be fun. We have this European tour coming up in August.
Nice.
So we're playing a bunch of really great shows. We got some cool big festivals.
That's great.
And I think it's going to be like the first opportunity for people to see the band for real.
Sure. That's awesome. Well, I am very glad you came over,
Awesome.
and thank you for hanging out.
Flowers now